When I got back to the game, I was getting very upset and confused. I thought about the way the monster looked at me, but it couldn't have heard what I said. That's impossible. It had to be a random occurrence. But why did it happen precisely at the moment I insulted the monster? Nothing about this game made any sense. The new Godzilla monsters, the weird replacement ones, out-of-place imagery like the green temples, quiz levels and red monster chases. It didn't seem to add up in any kind of meaningful way. If it was a prank, it wasn't funny in any way I could understand, and they'd clearly put far too much effort into it. If they were trying to make a genuine sequel with new Godzilla monsters, then why did they add everything else? Maybe it was some kind of experiment, some group project made by a bunch of really talented and crazy people, and they lost the cartridge somehow. Or maybe they intended for some random person to find it. It was all just fruitless guessing. As far as I could tell, there was only one way to figure out what the deal was with this game. To play it through to the end. Maybe, just maybe, there would be something in the credits. An explanation by the creators as to why they made this. Or it could be something much more cryptic and strange. Maybe even something horrifying. Before I got a good look at the Dementia board, I considered replaying Trance to see if the red monster would look at me again, but I decided against it. I wanted to keep moving forward. I was also somewhat worried that backtracking might cause the game to become even more strange. The Dementia board sounded a lot like the Saturn music, except it was slowed down and played with a piano-sounding instrument. Like most of these new map themes, it had a dangerous and suspenseful feel. While listening to the music, I looked at the Dementia board. There were 4 boss monsters this time. Space Godzilla, Manda, Gigan and Barragan. I was surprised to see who the 2 new Toho monsters were this time. But the best surprise, it was still to come. I started a quiz level, and here's another list of results in the same format as the last one. Can you swim? Answer yes, reaction happy. Do you like fish? Answer yes, reaction sick. Can penguins fly? Answer no, reaction sad. Can it spin in all directions? There was no clarification of what face meant by it, so I just guessed. Answer no, reaction surprised. Do you breathe oxygen? Answer yes, reaction weird face number 8. Number 6, does it taste good when you bite someone? I don't know who came up with this question, but I really hope they're getting mental help. Answer no, reaction annoyed. Is it night where you are? Answer yes, reaction weird face 6. Do you like cats? Answer yes, reaction confused. Is water wet? Answer yes, reaction angry. Have you ever broken a bone? Answer no, reaction happy. Do you like your job? Answer yes, reaction hurt. Would you like a new monster? Answer yes, reaction weird face 11. I wasn't entirely sure at the time by what face meant when he said new monster, but I could not resist answering yes, just to see what would happen. The result was mind-blowing. The game took me back to the board, and I had a new playable monster, in the form of Anguirus. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to play as Anguirus, since he was my second favourite Godzilla kaiju. And plus I never liked Mothra in this game all that much. I moved my new Anguirus piece over to the next level, eager to test out my new monster. Before I get into the level description, I'll talk about Anguirus a bit. Using the up and down buttons, you could choose between whether he stood in a bipedal stance or crawled around on all fours. It wasn't a huge difference, but being able to stand was helpful in boss fights, and crawling sometimes helped dodge obstacles. He could punch and kick like Godzilla, but no tail whip. Instead he had something far more interesting, the ability to curl up in a spiked ball of death and roll around. You could still take damage, but it was lessened. It was a good way of clearing out stage enemies, but unfortunately doing this also drained the power bar. But the spiked ball wasn't his only special ability. When you pressed start, he would fire a beam of energy from his mouth. It resembled Titanosaurus' sonar attack. And if this were a hack, it might have been inspired by the roar attack from Atari's Godzilla fighting games. Also of note is that when playing as Anguirus, the level meter gets glitched up. Judging by the life and power bar, I'd say he's on level 10. Now, onto the level. As you might have guessed from the level icon, these levels are green palette swap of the ground and background tiles from the Blue Mountains. But what I immediately saw was the water, which had a transparency effect. Was that even possible for an NES game? I knew the Super Nintendo could do it, but I'd never seen a transparency effect on an NES game. The Green Mountains music was played with the same instrument as the Blue Mountains, but the melody was totally different. It was a very simple song with a lot of abrupt pauses, followed by a loud note every few seconds. Anyway, I went through the usual strolling through the level, and there were no monsters or anything. But pretty soon I'd reached a cliff above the water. There was nowhere to go but into the water, so down I went. The water transparency made things a bit harder to see, but it's tolerable. After going underwater, I encountered two new enemies, a giant piranha of some kind, and a spiky bottom feeder thing. I liked the piranha because I could easily tell what it was. It was a sane enemy design that would appear in a real game, and there were very few enemies like this. They didn't take much hits to kill, but they were quite annoying, and could considerably trim down your life if they got close enough. They also tend to travel in packs. As for the bottom feeders, they're easy to deal with. They swim along the bottom of the screen towards you, and are easily crushed with the roll attack or jumped over. In this screen cap you can clearly see me about to run one of them over, and there's a pack of piranhas behind it. After I beat that level, I moved Godzilla onto a blue castle icon. I started the level and got a title screen with the text, "Unforgiving Cold." The level itself looked like a castle dungeon made of blue bricks with rows of identical statue faces on the walls. These statue faces had a permanent look of horror in their faces. There was also some flickering grey static, which didn't really obscure my vision, but adds to the very unsettling mood of these levels. The music was a 12-second loop of a low-pitched choir vocalizing that sounded very familiar to me. Whenever I played through one of these, I got this sudden, horrible feeling of anxiety. I had that feeling the further I progressed through the level, and the closer I was getting to something unspeakably evil. There weren't any enemies, but these were some of the longest levels in the game. I only played one, but it took 7 minutes to complete. I didn't want to admit to myself at the time, but I realised something playing in the Blue Castle level. This game has the power to make the player feel certain things. I don't mean in the sense that you get irritated playing a crappy game or get unnerved by something scary in a game. What I meant is that certain events in the game can instantly make you start feeling something. I know that sounds completely insane, but I don't blame you for not believing me. I wouldn't believe any of this either if I didn't play the game myself. But there is something very, very wrong with this game, and I still don't know how to explain it. So then it was time to fight Barragan's replacement. Although Barragan was originally the smallest monster in the game, his replacement was the largest. It was so tall, in fact, that the ground was noticeably lowered, and not Barragan's head was barely avoiding collision with the bar at the top of the screen. And he was just as frighteningly bizarre as he was huge. You may be wondering how he attacks without arms. Well, you see, he has the most powerful kick in the game, but his other fighting techniques are much stranger. First, he blasts a cloud of breath, or ice. I still don't know what it was, but it was a bunch of blue pixels right down at you, which causes you to freeze, so that's what led me to assume it was ice. Then he walks back to the right corner of the screen and then extends a huge Gatling gun from his abdomen. That might seem amusing to you. It was to me when I saw it for the first time. But as soon as it started firing, I stopped laughing. This attack was almost as annoying as Gigan's saw, and not Barragan could have been unbeatable if he constantly used it. Thankfully, he only did it twice while fighting him. Once you unfreeze, you can run up and start damaging the gun, which does extra damage to him. This helped me to destroy him, and it was time to play the third level type. I decided that I was going to use Anguirus to fight Manda and Gigan, and then fight Space Godzilla as Godzilla. It was only fitting. Before I get to the battles, I'll describe the third level type, the Arctic. The Arctic is exactly what you'd guess from the name, an icy tundra with very few water segments. The music reminded me a bit of the Northern Hemispheres from Donkey Kong Country, in 8-bit form. A very dangerous sounding song that made me think of being trapped in a tundra and freezing to death. There were 2 new enemies in this stage. First was a creature frozen in a block of ice. They block your way and you have to use a heat beam to thaw them out of the ice. They will look like a smaller version of Not Gazora, only without the eye. When freed, they do a strange crawling movement and push you backwards. It doesn't do any damage, but it's a bit annoying. After dealing with the Iceman, I kept walking for a minute or two and came upon a water segment. I jumped in, and this time I managed to get a screen cap showing how the water splashes when you jump in. I don't know how they programmed that, but that's pretty impressive. Another interesting thing is that the screen changes focus when you go underwater. Here you can see the other new enemy, a little thing I call Spike Walker. They walk towards you and explode randomly, or instantly if you attack them, sending spikes in every direction. The spikes don't do much damage, but they did get me dangerously close to falling into a pit a few times. Oh, and speaking of the pit, down into the water, the game has a platformer element, bottomless pits. There weren't any of these in the original game, since it was strictly an action game, but the pits are a neat addition. After getting back on land, I encountered a very unexpected mini-boss, Maguma, the walrus kaiju. I know this game has some obscure monsters to begin with, but wow. That was a pretty cool cameo for Maguma, an underappreciated kaiju as it is. Maguma's fighting tactics were very simple. He had a freeze beam and he could charge into you. Not very challenging, but certainly more entertaining than the Matango mini-boss in the original game. One really interesting thing about Maguma is that he doesn't die when you defeat him. He instead turns his tail and retreats. This was the first time I'd ever seen an enemy monster change direction, let alone retreat. I tried to chase after him, but he disappeared after I got into the water. For a bastard. And that does it for the Arctic. I'll talk about the Manda fight next. I actually forgot to mention that the different music played during the monster fights for the new kaiju is reused from themes actually in the games. So far the themes have been Titanosaurus using Gizoras, Biolante using Hedoras, Orga using Barragan/Mogira's music, Manda using Varans, and Space Godzilla using Mechagodzilla. As for the fight, Manda was a very crafty opponent. When it realised one tactic was ineffective, it would immediately change to a different one. Manda used quite a few tricks like spitting fire and biting, and the most irritating of all, constricting. It doesn't mercilessly drain down your life like Gigan's cutter, but it was by far Manda's strongest attack. One last thing I'd like to note that I found pretty cool was that the Gatengo from Atragon showed up during the fight to help me out. Manda crushed it with ease, but it was cool. Very cool. After I defeated Manda, I played through an Arctic level for health power-ups, and then it was on to Gigan's replacement. When I started the fight, I was very confused, because there was nothing there. I thought that was going to be like the Titanosaurus fight in Pathos, but just as it's about time it would have been to go back to the map screen, a piranha appeared, but wasn't there for long. As soon as it appeared, the speakers emitted an ear-splitting screech, and not Gigan flew in and ripped the poor fish to pieces. Well, that's one way to get the player on their toes. The abrupt entrance scared the hell out of me, and got my adrenaline rushing, which in retrospect is a good thing, because Not Gigan was one of the fastest, most unrelenting opponents in the game. Not Gigan was tough, but my new skills with Angerus helped even the score. This was still an incredibly intense fight. Not Gigan's attacks consisted of some kind of blood laser he spews from his mouth, and a downward slash. I was expecting some hellish variant of the buzzsaw attack, but thankfully there didn't seem to be one. The howl attack was invaluable in defeating him. I would have taken more screen caps of the fight, but really had to concentrate on this. After that, there was one monster left to take down, Space Godzilla. As I mentioned earlier, I used Godzilla for this fight. Space Godzilla's fighting technique was rather frustrating, but admittedly, a very clever idea. Space Godzilla would use his energy to create two flying crystals, which would reach the ground and become crystal spires. These spires not only block you from reaching Space Godzilla, but allowed him to constantly recharge to full energy, and blast you with a deadly full-charged Corona Beam until you broke the spires. Space Godzilla would eventually drain his own spires of energy until they shattered. But if you waited for that to happen, you'd probably lose a lot of life. Heat beams actually seem to re-energize the spires, so you had to use physical attacks. But when you finally got close enough to hit Space Godzilla, he was no pushover. When I punched him, he hit me back just as hard. Space Godzilla does everything in his power to knock you back to the left corner of the screen so he can create more spires. By the time this was over, I only had about 5 life bars left. But that didn't matter, because I didn't need to fight anymore. I needed to run. Here we go again. I decided that I really wanted to see the end of this game. As terrifying as these levels could be sometimes, I had to beat them to get through. I decided that no matter what happened, no matter what the game showed me, I was going to get to the end, and I also made sure not to say a damned word while playing a chase level from here on in. For this chase level I tried out Anguirus, since his roll attack allowed me to move faster than Godzilla or Mothra. The chase started off like the first two, except there was a river of blood below the ground. I was beginning to get the hang of it, and the extra speed from the roll helped me get an edge on the red monster. Especially since I didn't have to worry about a power limit. I could keep rolling endlessly. Like the previous levels with water, the ground inevitably reached a stop, so I rolled off into what appeared to be blood. To my surprise, the Hellbeast didn't follow me after that. It just stopped at the edge of the ground and grimaced. Guess it can't swim, I thought to myself. So I went under blood and continued moving. There wasn't anything around, but I knew something was up. The chase wasn't going to end that easily, could it? Surely something else had to show up. And sure enough, I heard the bellowing roar, sounding slightly different. And the monster was following after me in a new aquatic body. I had no idea it was a shapeshifter. After it reappeared, the chase started to get into the difficulty I had expected. Being submerged slowed me down and putting me and the beast at about the same speed. The only thing that would keep me alive was fast thinking and reflexes. I encountered some bottomless pits, which mines floated up from. I assume that if you hit one it would damage you and knock you back. Considering how fast the red monster swims, hitting the mines would be instant death. So I went through a great effort to avoid them. But that wasn't all I had to be wary of. Halfway through the chase, the Hellbeast revealed yet another surprise. A tentacle formed of intestine and tipped with a clawed set of jaws burst from its mouth and tried to pull me in and devour me. I only barely avoided the tentacle and the mines, but I could tell the beast was getting desperate because the chase was nearly over. At about a minute later, I'd spotted a bit of ground that served as the exit. I leaped with all my might that I could muster without breaking my controller, and the beast screamed with rage as I jumped out of the blood river in one last attempt to drag me down, but I escaped its grasp this time. I fell back on my bed and took a deep breath, satisfied with yet another escape. I was now headed to the fifth world. Entropy.